Welcome back. All right. So, Hockey 101 video. Here we go. I was just brainstorming and thinking to myself, all right, if I was a new fan of the game, what would confuse me? What part of the game would I say I don't know that I understand? And with the gatekeeping you get sometimes from hockey fans, I'm not saying all, but there are definitely some hockey fans that don't necessarily, and it is one of these weird things where I think the NHL does need to create new fans of hockey. Clearly, it's a sport that doesn't get as much attention as some of the others in the US. They're trying to make inroads there and increase their visibility. And for hardcore hockey fans who've been watching for a long time, they don't feel that's necessary and they don't like it. And they seem to come to sometimes take it personal. Again, it can be tough when you're a new fan of the game and you want to ask questions. And this is something I've been told one on one with people, both in person and on the internet via email and whatnot, that I'd like to know about this part of the game, but I don't want to ask the question because I'm going to be told that I'm stupid, or how do I not know this, or basically get called a newbie and you don't know what you're talking about. Is that still a word? People still call each other noobs? Do they? No? It's gone? Oh, man. That was a great one. Anyways, the number one thing on this board is goalie interference because there are fans of the game who don't understand goalie interference. I'm pretty good at figuring out when it's going to be goalie interference and when it's not. But I'm saying pretty good because at times I go, really? So the idea is simple. A goaltender should be able to make the play on and have a chance to stop the puck. And in this case, you are looking for an opposing player. So the offensive player's coming in on the goaltender, and the goaltender doesn't have a chance to make the save because the player contacted the goalie in the crease. So if the offensive player's in the crease before that puck gets there and makes contact with the goaltender and then the puck goes in, that's goalie interference. Unless he is pushed into the crease and makes contact with the goaltender because the defending player pushed him into his own goalie, which we've seen. We've seen times where a defenseman just two-hand an offensive player straight into their own goaltender, and in that case, if I was the goalie, I'd be getting up and asking, "So what were you thinking there? Because that hurt. So what are you thinking?" But goalie interference is tricky because there's also times where there's contact, the play will continue, and then the puck goes in, and then a team will challenge, arguing that their goaltender didn't have time to reset. So there's contact with the goaltender, say in the crease, and the goaltender is still, maybe trying to get their stick, maybe their blocker's a little bit off, and the puck goes in. Or they haven't had a chance to reset and get ready for the shot, and so those goals come back. Sometimes. And that's where things can be difficult. And if the goaltender comes out of the crease, so they're atop the crease, and then a player contacts them, technically that's ice that the offensive player is allowed to be in, but depending on the circumstance, we'll see whether or not that goal stands. So goal interference it should be relatively simple. Does the contact occur inside the crease? If it's a yes, was the offensive player that contacted the goaltender pushed in there by the defensive player? If the answer is no, the goal should come off the board. It should be a very simple scenario, but the problem is the game's very fast. And even in instant replay, it can be tough to tell, especially where you've got instances where, well, it looks like he contacted him inside the crease, but did he? This angle makes it look like he did. This angle makes it look like he didn't. Goalie interference reviews can take a while. And one thing to keep in mind is that there is going to be a fan base that's yelling, "That's a good goal," and the other fan base is going to be yelling, "That's not a good goal, that's goalie interference." It very often goes along tribal lines. Tribalism in the NHL isn't as bad as, say, the NFL. The NFL, I covered the NFL for a while on the Entertainment Guy channel, and man, yeah, I thought the tribalism in the NHL was something, but no, no. I can argue that I cheer for more than one NHL team, and fans go, "All right, we've heard of that. That can happen. We allow it." In the NFL, it's like their heads are gonna full on scanners. So it just no. But yeah, goal interference calls very often. When I'm doing the reviews that night, there'll be one fan base saying that was a good goal because, the other fan base saying that was no good because, and then they have a nice rational discussion. Hockey fans are known for having nice rational discussions with each other. I'm kidding. Anyways, the other side of things is offside. So you get a lot of goalie interference calls that are controversial. But offside can be controversial too. And it's simple. If I am an offensive player, I cannot proceed the puck into the offensive zone, the blue line. But if I have control of the puck on my stick and I proceed the puck into the offensive zone, that can be called onside. But what if I don't have it on my stick? What if I cross that blue line with it on my stick and then it's not on my stick, but I get it back after I've gone into the zone? Am I offside? Well, there are fans that will argue that I am, and there are fans that will argue I'm not. My argument's always been then it's offside, but there have been times where, depending on the play, that may or may not be the call. These calls can take a while, especially since with technology we have now, you can go frame by frame. The argument that I've made has been, if we're going frame by frame and it's just an inch offside, it doesn't feel like you're getting much of an advantage since you're one frame away from being onside. But I don't think the NHL can change this. The horse is out of the barn now. You can try to chase this down and put it back in there. I don't think this one's going back, because if there was a goal counted and they look and they go, it was close, we'll just count it. Because it's so close, we're going to have to go frame by frame, we'll leave it. Guaranteed that all over social media and on certain media websites as well, we would see that goal was offside, shouldn't have counted. That game shouldn't have gone that way. So now that we are calling it that way, it has to be called that way. Then there's intentional offside. So I want to talk about that here too. Intentional offside, I don't think gets called enough. I'm serious. So you're offside. Your teammate's offside. There are times where the offensive player skating the puck down, for various reasons, may intentionally go offside. They already know there's a player in the zone. They cannot enter the zone with the puck. It's going to cause a whistle. In the event that the officials go, that was intentional to get the whistle, that faceoff comes all the way down to your end of the ice rather than just outside the blue line. I don't think intentional offside's called necessarily as much as it could be. I understand why not, because you can't necessarily know what's going on inside their brain. But since we have intent to injure, and intention is thrown out there all the time by officials, fans, coaches, everybody, I don't see any reason why you can't call intentional offside a little bit more than you do if you're the officials, but I get it. Now, one thing for new fans to the game, nonviolent penalties. So I'm not talking about punches, although those aren't always called the same. And one of the things I love with hockey is you'll see like a little bit of a scrum after a goaltender makes the save. Maybe they take a poke at the goaltender, which means everybody's got to get up in each other's face. And then a guy throws a gloved punch, and I'm thinking, well, that should be roughing. But if it's in the playoffs, they're probably not going to call it. In October, they may very well call it. What is a penalty in October is not necessarily a penalty in April. It is the toughest thing for new fans of the game to deal with. And I know other sports have this as well to some extent, but it feels like with the NHL, it can really turn from, all right, everything's a penalty to, and now nothing's a penalty. There was one game I reviewed, I'm trying to remember what series it was, and I was just writing on the board, holding's not a penalty, roughing's not a penalty, slashing's not a penalty, because you could clearly see these plays were going on. The players know where the line is. And when they figure out, hey, the ref's not calling anything, it does kind of turn into a free-for-all out there. That's why when people say, well, the players should just police themselves, I mean, I understand where people are coming from, but no. Too many men on the ice. This is confusing for one reason. If you're watching a game, especially if you're there live, you will routinely see 7 guys on the ice. Sometimes it's a sloppy line change, you might get 8. But they give them a certain amount of space between the bench and the playing surface where they're allowed to make those changes. So if I'm coming to the bench and I'm a foot away from the bench, the guy replacing me will jump on. But, and I'm jumping off. So there is technically too many men on the ice. As long as I, the player exiting the ice, don't touch the puck, and the guy replacing me doesn't play the puck before I've left the ice, they don't normally call it. The exception being if I'm 40 feet away from the bench and the guy replacing me jumps on the ice, that goal doesn't or shouldn't count if there's a goal on the play, and it should be called as a too many men on the ice penalty. Very often you will see the other team is well aware it's too many, and you can tell because you'll hear 3 or 4 guys yelling, hey, really loud, and you'll usually see a guy down on the ice pointing around like this, and then the linesman will usually put his arm up, blow the whistle, because the linesman can call too many men on the ice. Linesmen can't call penalties in general, but too many men on the ice they can. And they can give feedback in other situations as well and tell the referee what they saw for when they're trying to make a decision. Because I think one crazy thing about the National Hockey League is these players skate really fast. All the plays take place really, really fast. And then the expectation is that two officials are going to be able to see all the potential fouls on the ice, which is virtually impossible. And then, of course, that standard is one that fans have and coaches have. And I don't know that it's realistic, but I think allowing all four officials to have a say in what they've seen on the ice makes a lot of sense. But again, linesmen aren't able to call penalties in most situations. This situation there, they will actually watch the line change at the bench. Kicked in goals. Can you kick in a puck? Yes. However, you can't use a distinct kicking motion. Think about it like in soccer where you tap the ball in off the inside of your foot. The inside of your skate, that's going to be called as kicking in, usually. If it's off the outside, it's directing, and they won't necessarily call that a good goal. And if that seems weird, it kind of is, but I get it at the same time. It's relatively, well, it's easier to bank it off the inside of your foot than off the outside of your foot. It's not impossible, but it's easier. And if there's a distinct kicking motion, and yeah, if your foot comes off the ice and you kick it out of the air, that's not going to count. You also can't glove a puck into the net. So if you can't hold it with your hand either, that's delay a game, because you're not allowed to grab the puck or holding onto the puck and all that. But if you knock the puck down with your glove and before your stick touches it, it bounces into the net. It doesn't touch anything else. That's gloved in. It's not going to count. But kicked in goals, there's always that debate during the season on what should or shouldn't have counted. And generally, if it's off the outside of the skate, it's probably going to count. If it's off the inside of the skate, it's probably not going to count. And if you can see that the player brings his foot back and then forward to make contact with the puck, and even if they're trying to kick it up to their stick, but they miss, that's going to be considered kicked in. But if they kick it to their stick and their stick tips it in, it's a goal. Department of Player Safety. Oh, actually, first offsetting 4-on-4 minors. And what's interesting with them, there was a time in the NHL where 4-on-4 minors weren't a thing. The Edmonton Oilers, there was speculation that they would intentionally have 4-on-4 situations to get that open ice and have a chance to score. And these are the 80s Oilers where they could score at will. So the NHL made it so offsetting penalties were still 5-on-5. The rule changed back some years later. So if there are two players that on the same play on opposite teams get penalized, you're going to see 4-on-4 hockey for 2 minutes. Now, if it's a fight and both players are going to the box for 5 minutes, there is no change in how many players are on the ice. It's still 5-on-5. I've always thought that was weird. I mean, honestly, if you're going to make one 4-on-4, why not make a fight a 4-on-4 situation? I know there's people who would say, well, no, they can't do that. But this is a league that at one point in time, if you scored on the power play, you stayed on the power play till those 2 minutes were done. The NHL's made plenty of changes when it comes to how penalties are called in terms of the manpower advantage or disadvantage on the ice. There was a time where if a goalie got a penalty, well, somebody else has got to go in. Now, of course, the goaltender doesn't go to the box. So I think if you made everything offsetting, I don't know. I don't know if that would make it so you're more likely or less likely to see a fight. 4-on-4 hockey is pretty entertaining, though. So now we'll get into the Department of Player Safety. So obviously you're going to have incidents that cross the line. And the idea of Department of Player Safety, run by George Peros, who, yes, was an enforcer in the National Hockey League during his career, which is part of the reason why people don't necessarily agree with him being the guy in charge, because they feel like, a guy who goes out there and fights during his career shouldn't be the guy deciding what is or isn't across the line. But his job is essentially to watch the game, and when a penalty takes place, if it's bad, decide whether to fine or suspend the players. The fines are ridiculously low because that's how they're negotiated in the collective bargaining agreement. If you want to see the fines be more substantial, it's going to have to come through the CBA. The money from the fines goes into a fund for the players. So the fines that they incur, that money doesn't go back to the National Hockey League. It doesn't go into any kind of a fund the NHL has. It goes into a Players Association fund. And then, of course, suspensions, you get suspended, you lose the pay for those games. That pay doesn't go into a fund or anything. You just don't get paid for those games you get suspended for. So during the season, you're going to see vicious stick swinging incidents. You're going to see things like that occur. knee on knees and all that. And I went through that with the penalties video, of course, where Department of Player Safety is inconsistent. I can't gloss it over. I feel like Department of Player Safety. I used to make videos talking about Department of Player Safety needs to be better, and I got tired of it. I was like, this I just talked about this, and it's still so all right. And so now it's kind of like, okay, so Department of Player Safety, and usually during a review, I'll talk about an incident and say, we'll see what Department of Player Safety has to say about it one way or the other. Because I already know people are talking about it. I already know people are wanting a suspension. I already know people are wanting at least a fine. And I have no idea if we're going to get it or not because it can be very, very inconsistent. Now we get to the It's All Bettman's Fault, which is a video I did many years ago. I've been talking about this since, 2017? And it's been the case all the way through. So the commissioner, Gary Bettman, works for the owners. Essentially, he is the guy who speaks on behalf of the owners. NHL owners over the years have had bad reputations. And in some cases it's warranted. In some cases I don't think it's as warranted. But having Gary Bettman as the very vocal spokesman on your behalf means he takes all the heat. The board of governors has all the power. If Bettman wasn't doing what the owners and the board of governors want, he wouldn't be in that job. The NHL, sure, it's behind some of the other sports in North America in terms of revenue, but their growth has still been quite good. The league is now going to be, they're looking at 34 or 36 teams, and when he took over, it was 24 teams in the league. So the growth is there. The growth's there financially too. But anytime anything happens hockey related, fans, some cases media, the blame all goes towards Bettman. And I think that was the plan when he was instated as commissioner back in the 90s by the owners. This takes the owners completely off the hook. Totally off the hook. So whenever anything happens that people don't like, you blame Gary Bettman, and there you go. If the owners disagreed with him, they'd say something. Back in 2020, when the players in the NHL went through the extension process with the collective bargaining agreement, there were some owners who weren't happy about how Bettman did it. And they felt like the players got a little bit too much in that. So when the owners don't like what Bettman does, we find out. It's out there, we find out. And generally, we don't hear owners saying they don't like what Bettman's doing or how he's saying it. So the owners are very happy that fans feel it's all Bettman's fault and he gets booed every time he goes out on the ice. As of, for instance, I've seen hockey fans saying it doesn't make any sense. You have how many teams in the NHL? You got 32 teams and 7 of them are in Canada. That's not enough. And yet, in my history videos, there was 12 teams in the league in 1968. 2 were in Canada, and they didn't accept Vancouver in the first round of expansion, which fans in Canada got really mad about, and the House of Commons was talking about. But Bettman was nowhere to be found in 1968. The reality is, I think the National Hockey League's owners have not seen a great amount of chance to make more money and to expand their wealth by expanding further into Canada. And that's a whole debate we can have some other time. But it's not on Bettman. I think this is owners in general. Jeremy Jacobs of the Boston Bruins, very vocal about Quebec a few years back and saying that, well, we're not putting a team back in Quebec City, and I don't want a team in Quebec City, and quite gung-ho about cities like Houston. So that's where the owners are at, but people will blame Bettman because that's what he's there for. He's there to make these decisions and do all this negotiating on the owner's behalf and take all the heat. So he gets paid, takes all the heat. Missed stoppage challenges. This is where things get difficult, and again, I'm gonna try to avoid the specifics. We'll see them as the season gets rolling here. But now coaches can, after a goal, say you missed a stoppage. The puck went out of play, so you have the netting behind the net, and if the puck goes over the glass and hits the netting, it's easy for an official in that moment to maybe miss it and think it hit the glass because again, the game happens very quickly. Players will normally know and let the coach know, and then, and obviously with a replay, you should be able to see the netting move. And so that missed stoppage means the goal that happened after no longer counts. But there are cases where a player will knock a puck out of the air with a high stick. You're supposed to blow the whistle there if he knocks the puck out of the air with a high stick and his teammate touches the puck first. But if the other team touches the puck first, it's a live puck. And so Missed stoppage challenges are out there, and generally that's what it is. Is it's either the puck went out, or it's a high stick, and then their own teammate touched the puck next, so that's supposed to be waved off. And it does bring up for me one thing that I still don't understand. So I knocked the puck out of the air with a high stick. I know if I touch it again, it's going to be a whistle. So I stand there like a goober on my skates and look at the puck while the other team can come over and just take it and skate away. I do not understand why players don't just play the puck and take the whistle. I don't understand. It's the one thing NHLers do that I'm like, what are you doing? Because there are definitely goals scored because a guy knocks the puck out of the air with a high stick and he and his teammates decide, well, we don't want to touch it. It's going to be a whistle. Touch it. I don't care if it's going to be a whistle. Do you really want the other team to take the puck and skate down the ice and score? No. So it's one of those weird things. So you'll see that in game 2. And if you're like, why doesn't anybody want to touch the puck? Are they playing hot potato? It's because somebody knocked it out of the air with a high stick, and then if they touch it, well, then it's a whistle. It's so weird. I really don't understand why they don't just. I would just play the puck. Just play the puck, because if the other team takes the puck, they can score, and sometimes they do. Cross checks. And I have to bring this up because it does feel like over the last year and a half, maybe, they've started to become bad. So cross checks where you have your stick, you two-hand somebody, usually in the back. Sometimes it's in the side. You hit them in the kidney, man. But usually it's in the lower back. It's a cross check. And this motion of two-handing with your stick right into somebody's back is a penalty. However, it usually takes 3 or 4 before it's a penalty. Sometimes it takes 6. Sometimes it takes 10. Sometimes it's just, okay, that's way too many. Now you're going to the box. I don't understand that personally. I think if the first cross check is a penalty, then you call the first one. And there are definitely players that take advantage of this because, again, if you got a guy in front of your net who's trying to block your goaltender and you have a chance to cross check him right in the lower back, A, that hurts like hell. And B, it probably clears the net. And C, it probably makes him think twice about going back to the crease and blocking out the goaltender, which is what it's designed to do. However, it's supposed to be a penalty. Because to me, if a slash is going to get called every time, why not a cross check? Like, I can't slash a player in the hands without getting a penalty, right? It doesn't take the third or fourth. So why is cross checking different? It's such a weird thing to me. So I had to have that on the board. The goalie trapezoid. So there's an area in the corner where the goaltender's not allowed to go. They're allowed to go behind the net and play the puck. They can skate into the area outside of there, but there's this little squared off area that if they play it there, it's a penalty for the goaltender. I want it to go away. It's a penalty I don't think we need in the National Hockey League anymore, but it's there. So if you see the goaltender come out, play the puck behind the net, and then he decides, whoops, can't do that, it's because it's where he's not allowed to play it. And sometimes a goaltender will come out to do that, and then the puck ends up in the back of his net because he can't actually play the puck and the other team gets there. The instigator penalty I want to talk about too. It's not called as consistently as some of the other penalties in the NHL, and I've already talked about consistency. And the idea of the instigator is simple. A player throws, usually it's on a play where a player throws a clean hit, and the opposing team gets mad because maybe that's a star player they knocked down. So they come in, they drop their gloves, and they just start pummeling the guy, who then decides, I better fight back or I'm not going to have a face. And so he starts fighting back, but the guy who jumped him gets the instigator. The problem is, again, it's not called all that consistently. There have been times where both players agree to the fight, and then I see an instigator. And the instigator's not just like an extra 2 minutes. You get 2 minutes for the instigator, 5 minutes for the fight, and then a 10-minute misconduct. So it's 17 minutes in penalties for starting a fight, which I understand. But it feels like in today's game, which is nowhere near as violent as it was 20 plus years ago, I don't know that it's that necessary. And since it's not called all that consistently either, that's one penalty that I would be willing to get rid of. The trapezoid and the instigator are two that I just don't think are all that useful. We're not going to see an NHL where enforcers become like a main attraction again. There aren't enforcers coming up through juniors and college like there were back in the 80s and early 90s. So I don't think there's any concern. The game has completely changed, not just at the NHL level, but overall. So I don't feel like the instigator's necessary. But you guys can let me know your thoughts. So these were just the ones that I felt like, for new fans of the game, both on ice and off ice. These are the things they might, need a little bit of an adjustment to, or just a discussion of. So I thought, why not do this video now? Let me know your thoughts in the comment section below, as always. Don't forget to hit like and subscribe in the event you've not done so already. Thank you guys so much for all your support as always. I will talk to you again soon.